Good morning. It's so good to be with you all. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be in worship, and I want to give a big thank you to your pastor, Reverend Alex Powell, for asking me to come, and I'm so grateful. I am a product. I was formed by camping ministry. My life would be completely different if I had not had church camp in my life. And so I'm just so grateful for congregations that support and encourage volunteers from their church, whether that be their pastor or others, to go and spend time with the kiddos. It's just, our kiddos are facing a lot right now. We all are, but they desperately need places where they can experience God in creation, and they can meet older adults that aren't their parents, that can talk about their faith with them, and where they can make friends. I just actually had one of my friends that I met in 5th grade at church camp. I am now 55, by the way. She lives in Seattle, and she came down for a week, and we spent a week together, and it just kind of felt like camp again. So that is the kind of friendship that I feel kiddos get when they have those experiences at camp. So anyways, I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful that you all have Alex as your pastor. I've never heard him preach, so I bet he's pretty good. Okay, well, will you pray with me? May the words of my lips, the meditations of our hearts, be pleasing in your sight, O God, our rock and our redeemer. Every one of us, every person is creative. Now, I don't usually make these proclamations because I think proclamations like such can be a little bit troublesome in my experience. I do feel like a sign of spiritual maturity is openness to the movements of the Spirit, openness to new understandings of what God is up to. So I don't lay out these blanket statements very often. I also think that when religious people, particularly religious leaders, tell people what to believe and lay out blanket statements, it ends up not working out so well. I don't think it's very helpful, really. I think we all maneuver our faith and in ways that align with our own individual experiences and with our own encounters with God. That said, I really, really, really believe that every person is created creative. As humans being formed in the image of God, I have come to understand that at the heart of this imago Dei, this God image, is the idea that as God created, we too are designed to be creative. Now, I know some of us are artists. I mean, I can already tell in this congregation that we have some artists in the midst, right? I am deeply appreciative of artists. I am deeply appreciative of art. Big fan of the Impressionists. Big fan of Monet. Just saw an amazing one at the Norton Simon. We hadn't been to the Norton Simon before. Whoa, amazing. So I love art. Now, I'm not an artist. I like to say I dabble, which is fine with me. And so I think it's clear to say that you don't have to be an artist to be creative, right? Artists are creative, but you don't have to be an artist to be creative. Last weekend, I was at a retreat sponsored by the CalPAC conference at the Mariposa Retreat Center. Has anybody ever heard of the Mariposa Retreat Center? No? Okay, great. Well, can I do a little publicity real quick? The North District owns the property where South Pasadena UMC used to be, and now Renew United Methodist Church is. And so there's an 8-acre property in South Pasadena that is the Renew Sanctuary. There's a mansion called the Balicki Mansion that is 100 and some years old. Huge thing that needs a lot of love and attention and refurbishing, but it's beautiful. And then there's what was a parsonage. It is a 5-bedroom, 4.5-bath parsonage. It's relatively large. And now the North District has converted it into a small retreat center. So there are 8 beds, and we run retreats out of there for small groups, individual retreats, solo retreats, or I've got a quilting group that comes twice a year. But if you're interested in, I know it's not a retreat for you all, it's like 15 minutes away, but maybe you have a group that would like to do a Bible study or an overnight retreat, or you yourself want to get away. It's a lovely space. So get a hold of me about that if that's a thing you'd like to do. Okay, back to where I was going. So we had this retreat, and it was called Created for Creating, the number 4. So what we did is we had 4 different leaders guide us through 4 different creative practices. We made prayer beads together, following our hearts to find just the right beads and bead combinations so as to create prayer bracelets and zipper pulls, or prayer bracelets and zipper pulls. And then we took those with us, and some of us are going to use them in our own prayer lives, and some of us are going to give them to people that we think might need them for their prayer lives. We painted with acrylics and canvas, each one of us creating our own version of a sunset. We leaned into that intuitive part of ourselves, choosing colors that felt right to us. We felt the brush on the canvas and allowed the process of painting to bring us joy. These may not be hung in the Getty anytime soon, but for each of us, it was a practice of learning to flow and to bring life to a colorful scene out of the blankness of a canvas. We also spent time practicing culinary art. We created a scrumptious meal together, adding our own flair to the collection. And then lastly, we imagined, and we let our pens bring words to the page in a creative writing session. We joined in all of these times with a deep connection to that part of ourselves that sometimes lies too far deep within to reach, our creative core. We practiced, we experimented, and we flowed with the creative spirit of our creating God. So I want to look at today's scripture text. Our Bible, this Bible that we have, begins with the story of, in the beginning. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind, a ruach, from God swept over the face of the waters. Oh, such great imagery. And I love that both the deep and the waters have a face. That's kind of fun. So this word ruach, real quick. I know 4 Hebrew words from, undergraduate and seminary. I've walked away with 4. 3 of them are from Genesis 1. Interestingly enough, because my professor, both in undergraduate and in seminary, loved Genesis 1. So that's that. Ruah is a Hebrew word used both to describe the wind and to describe the Spirit of God throughout the Hebrew scriptures. I often stop and close my eyes when I feel a breeze, because it's a reminder that the Spirit who was present at the creation of the world is still moving and still forming and still creating in our lives. So as the Genesis 1 story continues, we hear God speaking the stars and the planets and the moon into existence. God forms the land and the seas, and God brings life in the form of plants and vegetation. And then God creates the creatures that dwell upon the land and the creatures in the seas. They make a special point to tell us that God created, quote, everything that creeps upon the ground of every kind, end quote, which is one of the reasons I have this precarious respect for spiders. Because we're supposed to take care of them. Then we turn to today's story. God spoke, and this is from the Message, because I like this translation. Let us make human beings in our image, making them, our image is not from the Message. That's an original translation. It's plural. Making them reflect our nature so they can be responsible for the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, the cattle, and yes, earth itself, and every animal that moves on the face of the earth. God created human beings. God created them godlike, reflecting God's nature. So I do like this from the Message because I feel like it's a better version than others. I like the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, its translation. I like this one because in many translations, when we hear about what human beings are supposed to do, they're supposed to have either dominion over or stewardship of the things that God has created. Well, dominion over becomes a problem. In our current environmental crisis, we can see that maybe we're not caring for this creation and the creatures the way we ought to. I was on a retreat last fall where this idea of either being responsible or stewarding or dominion over was described by a man who's part of the Cherokee Nation. He was saying that he has adopted the word co-sustainer to use in place of steward or being responsible for or dominion. That we are co-sustainers with God of this creation that has been given to us. I like it. I think that it is better for our planet and our environments if we think of ourselves as co-sustainers with God. It feels more hopeful and more caring. So as creation comes to a close, we have human beings made in the image of God, reflecting God's nature. God created us. God created us godlike. So lots of commentators and scholars have written about this text and its meaning. What I believe is that here, in these few verses, God is showing how God pours God's likeness into each of us. And I believe that God's likeness is creativity. This whole first chapter of Genesis is about God's creative work, creative joy of God. So it makes sense for me to believe that if God is creating us in God's image, God is creating us to be creative. All of us. Every one of us. I feel like if this is indeed true, that maybe we need to send a memo out to the people who teach our children. Now, I recognize that some of you might be teachers, possibly in our public education system, but I want to say, I feel like I've taught as well in various settings. There's something that saddens me about our public education system in that we give too little space and too little attention to empowering our children and youth to tap into their own creative core. Now, I taught kindergarten a few times, and I understand that kindergartners are forming their fine motor skills. When they are coloring inside the lines, it's a way for them to practice those fine motor skills, and it helps them learn to follow instructions. And it teaches them that certain things tend to be certain colors. I get that. I can see the purpose behind coloring inside the lines. I've also substituted an 8th grade math class, which is not my strong suit. I understand there are formulas and there are standards that students need to learn. I get that. And I know that coloring for the sake of coloring is good and creative. And maybe you want a blue duck instead of a yellow duck. That's okay. I know that helping kids to find their own way of solving a problem, one that uses their innate understanding and their own creative problem-solving skills, I feel like that will serve them very well down the road. By the time most of us graduate high school, I feel like our belief in our own creative core has taken a million different hits. I talk to people too often who do not believe that they are creative in any way. And I think that's a shame. We are, every single one of us, created as creative beings. And expressing our creativity free of judgment is one of the healthiest and the most spiritually formative things that I think we can do. So, we're getting ready to go into Lent. This Wednesday is Ash Wednesday. So I was wondering if, as we prepare to go into this journey of Lent, maybe we could ponder, think about, looking at incorporating creativity into this liturgical season. I know that by the book, Lent is a time for giving things up. for fasting in some ways to draw closer to God and to better identify with the trials and the tribulations and the temptations of Christ. And I think those practices are very worthwhile, for sure. But I'd like to suggest that maybe it's okay to take on something, a practice of some sort, and some sample practices like creative things that you could do during Lent. So here's my little nudge for us this Lenten season. Let us tap into that creative, God-gifted core. Some of us garden. That's creative. Some of us cook. That's creative. Some of us do woodworking. That's creative. Some of us journal or write. That's creative. Some of us sew or knit or do needlework. That's creative. Some of us enjoy photography. That's creative. Some of us engage in active listening and tend to our relationships. That's creative. I'm not sure what creative leanings you have, and maybe this whole nudge is not that big a deal for you because you already have creative practices. I might encourage you to try new ones during Lent, but for some of you, this is either total rubbish or terrifying to lean into that creative core of yourselves. I get that. But we can just practice, right? What if we practice creativity during Lent? And what if it deepens our relationship with God, our Creator? What if it draws us closer to Jesus, who created entirely new paradigms for people, who created through his healing, who created through his words, who created through his gorgeous love of all people? What if you practice creativity during Lent, what if you uncover some lost joy? What if you, even for a moment, feel like a kid again? What if it unlocks something in you that you've desperately been looking for? I believe creativity can do all those things. It has in my life, and I have heard others testify how it has in theirs. So maybe you're on board with this idea. Maybe you need a little more encouragement. When I say practice, I really want us to practice. You know, it's like a spiritual practice or practicing an instrument. Let's do this free of judgment. And you know, our own judgment is typically the most critical. So free of that as well. We can practice this God-given creativity and let it be about the process. It doesn't have to be about the product. It's not so much about what you make, it's about how you enjoy the creativity in the practicing of it. The end game of practicing creativity is that you get to practice it, not that you have to produce something. So, I'd like to give a few ideas or suggestions for your creative time. Maybe you already have some, and if you do, jot them down or get out your phone and take a note right now. Here are some ideas. There was one Lenten season my husband and I chose to write poems every day. So we each wrote our own poems. Sometimes we shared them with each other, sometimes we didn't. But we wrote a poem every day for the 40 days of Lent. It was really cool for both of us. Maybe you want to take a class. Maybe there's a class to take. There's probably lots of classes. You live in Burbank, California. I can imagine you can access a few art classes from here, right? There's also this thing where you could just go, maybe some of you do this, like you just go to a craft store or an art store and you just wander around and look at stuff until something catches your attention. Like I don't do silk flowers, but every once in a while I'm like, whoa, this silk flower is amazing, so I'm gonna take this silk flower and do something with it, right? I don't know, sometimes we gotta find that intuition, find that creative thing going on inside of us. There's also a practice, and I can email this to you, called Visio Divina. Have you heard of Lectio Divina? So the thing called Lectio Divina, which is Greek for, Lectio, lectionary, and Divina, divine. So it's like sacred reading is Lectio Divina. Well, it's a similar practice. It's a way of praying, an ancient way of praying, and it's Visio Divina, so it's with images. So that you could be walking through the park and you could see a beautiful flower. It's supposed to be a super bloom. So excited about the super bloom. You could be walking along and see a flower or a tree or a bird. And it's a way of just like entering into that moment in a prayerful manner. So I can send you, it's a flow, it's like a prayer flow that I can send to you if you're interested. But basically you look at a picture, a piece of art, or a piece of creation, or something that you find beautiful, and you go into it. And you say, God, what do you have to say to me through this thing? Beautiful, maybe not, And what does this image have to say to me? And so you kind of pray your way through that and just listen, because I think God's always there trying to tell us stuff, and sometimes we're too busy and moving too fast and we don't stop, and look around. So it's a way of intentionally practicing that stopping and looking and praying. Visio Divina. So that might be some way to experience creativity that you have not before. And then I think, you should invite a friend. I think you should invite a family member. I think you should find a little group of people maybe to do this with. Some of my most treasured and cherished moments with my children is when I say, hey, do you guys want to paint? Or we'll collage, right? We'll take everything off the dining room table and bring out all the paints, and I cover it with a plastic cloth, obviously. They're 23 and 21, but still, we all make a mess. So we lay it all out, and I've had the kids' friends over for these times, and 4 hours later, they're still at it, and I love that. So maybe you have somebody you'd like to do it with. Those are a few ideas. Again, you all know where your creative leanings might be and where your edge is to maybe try something new. Mosaic's one of my next things. So if you're a mosaic person, then just come see me afterwards, because that's my next project. We're getting ready to head to Jerusalem with Jesus, right? That's what Lent's about. We're getting ready to face the trials and the tribulations that Jesus faced on his way to Jerusalem. He really was trying to create a whole new vision of what God's love looked like, and what caring for people looked like, and what compassion looked like. And just so many people didn't understand it. They just didn't understand. So he was trying to create these new ways of seeing. And he's going to face a lot of trials, a lot of tribulations, a lot of struggles, a lot of, what are you talking about? That doesn't make sense. And we are too, in our own lives. I don't know what the next 40 days is going to hold, but I'm pretty sure it's going to hold some trials, some tribulations, some struggles. For all of us personally, for the community that we live in, for the world that we live in, we're going to be facing some things. And I'm just hoping. I'm hoping that by tapping into that God-gifted creative core in yourself, that you're going to have some more strength. It's going to fortify you. It's going to fuel you. It's going to fuel me. It's going to fuel us to go into this season with a grace and a love and a joy that somehow makes the trials and the tribulations just a little bit easier. Will you pray with me? God, move in our midst. We know you do. Just help us to see it. Help us to feel it. Continue to pour that creative spirit into us and spark the light of your love and your creativity in each of us, and help that light to spread so that others can also feel that love and that joy. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.